Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Wildcard Wednesday. My name is Ben Pulowski. I am the Senior Learning Center Trainer here at Geotab. Thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. Our topic for today is Spotlight on Cloud ELD. So it's a term that you may have heard talked about quite frequently within Geotab if you've been reading our blog, seeing some of the documentation that we've been sending out. So I want to focus today on this particular new feature and how it affects the workflow within both the Geotab Drive app and on the admin side for ELD and hours of service. I am joined today by Ben Schwartz, who is one of our solution specialists, as well as Carrie Carter, who is one of our partner account managers. So they are available to answer any questions that you have at any point during the webinar. There is a questions box. You can just go ahead, type in any questions that you have at any point, and we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So let's jump in. Cloud ELD, here's our agenda. So going to start by looking at sort of what is Cloud ELD and how it works. Some advantages of Cloud ELD over the previous logic that we used to use, some features to be aware of, some new features that you might not know about in the Geotab Drive app and in the database that are going to help with keeping your fleet compliant. A before and after snapshot. So looking at how it used to operate versus how the system operates now. And then finally, resources like the compliance and implementation guide and some additional resources as well to help you when you are sent on your way. So Cloud ELD, how it works by interconnecting the Geotab Go device and the My Geotab fleet management software with a mobile device running the Geotab Drive app. So this is a very fundamental change to the logic that we were using previously. And by previously, I mean prior to about May of this year. This exists as a result of the ELD mandate, where we are now required to pull in engine data and synchronize that data as part of the logs. This was not a requirement previously. Additionally, we also have the Go device playing a much larger role in the generation of the duty status logs. Before Cloud ELD, that was not the case. The logs were entirely generated by the GPS in the tablet. That's not really the case anymore. So here's a visual representation of how this works. Starts with the Geotab Go device sends engine data and location data to My Geotab, to our servers. The Drive app sends the duty status of the driver to My Geotab. My Geotab combines the data from the Drive app and the Go device to create an accurate record of duty status, and My Geotab sends the updated information back to the Drive app. So previously, the tablet and the Go device had a cable that were connecting each other. But in spite of that, they weren't really talking to each other. That's changed now, where there is more of a, I guess, collaboration between the Go device and between the Geotab Drive app that is running on the tablet. Another change is that the iOX USB cable that connects the tablet to the Go device previously was required. You had to have it physically plugged in order for the Geotab Drive app to function properly. Well, that's no longer the case. It's listed here as optional, and it actually is recommended because it is a way of supplying power to the tablet. And if the tablet runs out of battery, that's going to create its own unique set of problems. So it is recommended, but it's also a situation now where the driver does not have to be actively using the app. It could be where the app is closed and the driver tosses the tablet into the back seat of the vehicle, maybe to sidestep some regulations. Well, we're still going to generate logs because we are pulling data from the Go device now that contributes to those logs. So some advantages of this new system. Number one, more reliable, no back office intervention. So set it and forget it. Once you have all of your settings set up, there's really very little required on the part of the driver or rather on the part of the admin side, at least for the generation of duty status logs. There's no pairing process. So a question we might get, why aren't you using Bluetooth? Well, Bluetooth can be unreliable. You can have instances where there is an error pairing the two devices. So if we're communicating directly with the server, we sort of sidestep the problems that come with a Bluetooth or with a hardwire connection. The next two are related: reduces power consumption for longer battery life. It's compatible with different platforms, both Android and iOS. So something that cell phone or smartphone manufacturers are doing is they're restricting the ability for apps to run continuously in the background. And that's a way to limit the power consumption of apps so that it's not depleting the battery on the phone or the tablet as quickly. So if you were allowed to run every app in the background all the time, that's going to drain the batteries and the devices would become less reliable. Even more so than that, if we were to run our ELD process in the background on iOS, that's a violation of Apple's terms. So we do this by sending the data from the Go device, relying more heavily on that and sending it straight to the server. And we're trying to rely less on the tablet. Accuracy of logs even when operating different vehicles. So when a driver operates one vehicle and then has to move to another vehicle, the hours of service logs need to be transferred over. And that is a requirement of the ELD regulations. And Cloud ELD does make it easier for us to do that. So I'd mentioned that part of the ELD mandate is that we're now pulling some specific engine data and making that part of the duty status logs. So with the Go device working with the tablet, the Go device records any vehicular data it can access through the diagnostic port, including speed, engine data, temperatures, coolant levels, etc. Go device also records the GPS coordinates it receives from its internal GPS module, and that's how location information, which is also a new addition, is populated into the duty status logs. Where's that information sent? So the vehicular and positional data recorded by the Geotab Go device is sent to a My Geotab server over a cellular connection. My Geotab organizes the aggregated data collected from the Go device and presents it to the user through a user-friendly interface. This data is available in various forms ranging from reports, maps, and notifications. So I'm going to back up a couple slides here and go back to this graphic. So you have data from the Go device and data from the tablet, right? And that's both going to the My Geotab server. The data is essentially reconciled there between those two different sources, and then it's sent back to the tablet for the driver to be able to access the data. So before, the tablet played a much larger role in the generation of duty status logs. It plays a smaller role now. It's more so a conduit for the driver to be able to view information about those duty status logs. The Geotab Drive app synchronizes with My Geotab, and that can be done via Wi-Fi or cellular. To download the latest duty status logs and vehicle data, the Drive app also uploads logs manually created by the driver to My Geotab for consolidation. So that's basically the point that I just went over. It's coming from those two different sources. So coverage. This is an important topic because Geotab and ELD and hours of service in Geotab Drive aside, just the regular function of the Go device, the transmission of data depends on coverage. So what's happening is that the Drive app is constantly receiving updates from the My Geotab server. Now, even if the vehicle is going in and out of coverage, Geotab Drive is going to pick up and store the data whenever connections are made throughout the day. So think about, just for a moment, just think about the Go device. Forget the tablet, forget ELD, just the Go device that's plugged into your vehicle. What happens when that vehicle goes out of cell coverage on the database side? We don't lose any data. There's just a delay in that data being transmitted from the Go device back to the server. And once the vehicle enters into an area with cell coverage again, that information is going to transmit over. It's the same with Cloud ELD, right? When you're out of coverage, You're not losing any data. When you go back into coverage, everything is going to update. So what's going to happen for most vehicles, even if they're driving in rural areas, is that they're going to be moving in and out of coverage as they travel. And as they do travel, or as they do move back into coverage, the information is going to update. In the case that the vehicle is out of cellular coverage, the Go device will store all recorded data together with date and time information on its internal memory. Once the vehicle enters an area with cellular coverage, Go device will transmit its stored data to the server. The server then coordinates the data and sends all missing pieces to the Drive app. So the Geotab Drive app is designed to work offline. If you are in a vehicle that goes out of coverage, Geotab Drive can be used to access all the logs up to the point the vehicle went out of coverage, and it still can be shown to law enforcement. So that's a common question that we get, what happens if there is a DOT inspection when the vehicle is out of coverage. All logs are going to be there up until the point where the vehicle went out of coverage. And what the driver would have to do basically is show the DOT officer that the app is malfunctioning, which there's if you're familiar with the Geotab Drive app, there would be a big red triangle up in the corner that would say GPS disconnected. And that's in compliance. That's 100% within compliance. When a vehicle goes back into a coverage area, within minutes, the missing data is going to be added to the app and becomes available for any future offline periods. So some features. These are some different features and some different tools that now exist both within the app and within the admin side as a result of Cloud ELD. So on the whole, Cloud ELD does make things easier. So like I said earlier, there's no back office intervention. Pretty much you log into the app, you select the vehicle the first time, and from there you're going to get all of these automatically generated duty status logs. There is some knowledge and there is some workflow that comes along with it. And even though there is that, on the whole, it still is much easier and much more convenient and much more manageable than how the system operated previously. So starting by looking at duty status changes. So now a drive log will be generated when the vehicle goes above 5 miles per hour. There's nothing that the driver has to do. They don't have to reach out and they don't have to push the drive button, and as a matter of fact, they shouldn't. When the vehicle hits 5 miles an hour, it puts them on drive. An on-duty log, so it'll move them back from drive to on, that will be generated when the vehicle does not move for 5 minutes. And it will backdate the log time to when the vehicle first stopped. So I'm driving down the road, I'm in a drive status at 1 o'clock, I stop my vehicle. At 1:05, it's going to change me from drive to on, but it's going to backdate that to 1 o'clock, to when I actually stopped. Again, there's no need for the driver to reach out and hit drive, hit on. It's all going to happen automatically. Because RODs, record of duty statuses, are coming from the vehicle's ECM. They're not being generated by the tablet anymore, at least to the extent they were previously. It is not recommended to manually change between on and drive. Really, all the driver has to do is go off duty and on duty. They don't really have to ever put themselves on the drive line or take themselves off of the drive line. So this new system requires less intervention from the driver. There's less for them to worry about. So this is on the database side. Automatic origin drive logs cannot be removed or edited to another status, which means the vehicle goes above 5 miles an hour, it puts them on drive. That's it. You can't change that. And that is part of the ELD mandate. If it's generated automatically, it stays how it is. All of the other duty status logs cannot be removed, but they still can be edited. So if you had an instance where a driver selected the wrong vehicle, or a driver incorrectly claimed a log that they thought belonged to them but actually belonged to someone else, those logs can still be edited, but those drive logs cannot. Because duty status logs are coming directly from the ECM, drivers will likely need to make use of yard moves or personal conveyances. Now, those are two new settings, two new exemptions that exist as part of the ELD mandate and as part of Cloud ELD. And that's controlled through each individual's user profile. So if you go into a user's profile on the database side, under their HOS settings, you have yard move and you have personal conveyance. Well, this becomes especially important now because part of the ELD mandate is that we're required to generate status logs and monitor all vehicle activity. So whether or not there is a driver assigned, when that vehicle goes above 5 miles an hour, it's going to create a drive log. I'll say that again. Whether or not there is a driver assigned, whether or not in that moment the vehicle is being used for hours of service purposes, if they hit 5, they're on the drive line. And that's what makes this so important. So I'm a driver. At the end of the day, I go off duty. Later that night, someone in the yard has to move the truck. Guess what happens? They hit 5 miles an hour. It puts me, the driver who's at home in bed, on the drive line. I come in the next morning and I'm in violation. So a couple of things to be aware of with that. Number one, drivers need to make sure that they are logging completely out of the app at the end of the day. Not just going off duty, but they click on their username and they press the button that says log out. Number two is the screen we're looking at now, specifically yard move. So if people are going to be moving the vehicles in the yard after hours, they're going to want the ability to apply the yard move exemption, which is going to keep someone from being put on the drive line and then come in the next morning to find out they are in violation. There is also a personal conveyance exemption. Both of these are at the discretion of the carrier, both yard move and personal conveyance. Yard move, I would very, very, very strongly recommend turning that to on. Personal conveyance is more up to you. There are some fleets who choose to not allow their drivers to drive a truck for personal conveyance, like stopping at the hotel and then they want to drive to a restaurant for dinner. And they don't have to allow that. So that's at the carrier's discretion. Here's how it looks on the app side. So within the HOS options, if those are turned on, yard move and personal use, they would just hit the button that says start. And when they're done with that exemption, they would hit the button that's going to change to stop. And that's going to be reflected in the duty status logs. And it's going to show an annotation as well. So here's another feature to be aware of in the database that's tied in closely to Cloud ELD. Each vehicle now has a property for hours of service. The default setting is automatic, and you can get to this through your vehicles list. If you click on a vehicle, and there's a button that says more details. That hours of service setting by default is set to automatic. The first time that someone logs into Geotab Drive and selects that vehicle, this automatic is going to change to on. It's going to happen by itself. There's no action required on anyone's part. Log into the app, select the vehicle, it changes from automatic to on. What that means is that it's basically enabled automatic duty status logs. Hit 5 miles an hour, it puts you on drive. Stop for 5 minutes, it puts you back to on duty. That's what that does. Now, if you want to go in and set this to off, you can do that. That's something you would probably want to use for a vehicle that is not going to be used for hours of service purposes. If it is turned off, the vehicle will not automatically generate any duty status logs. Unassigned driving time. Unassigned logs are generated when an HOS vehicle is driven without a driver logged in. Again, part of the ELD mandate, we have to create logs for any time that the vehicle is used. Now, when the driver logs into the app, they are going to be prompted with these unassigned logs. And this is basically the system saying, hey, we saw that you just logged into this vehicle. this vehicle was driven at these other times. Was this you? And if it was, you can claim those logs and assign them to yourself. If they are not yours, you would just hit the skip button and you can leave the logs for someone else. Unassigned logs can be viewed in the HOS logs that's on the admin side in the database under unidentified driver. So with the ELD mandate, there are going to be these unidentified, unclaimed logs. There's basically one of two things that needs to happen. Either the driver needs to claim those logs, or the carrier needs to assign those logs to a driver, or the carrier would leave it unassigned and annotate the log as to why it's being left unassigned. Has to be one or the other. So you go into the database, you can run logs for an unidentified driver, and again, you have two options. Those logs need to be identified to the driver, or need to be assigned to a driver, or they have to be left unassigned and annotated as to why. Verify logs upon login. So all drivers are required to verify their logs. They're prompted to do that now, both within logging into and logging out of the application. So that is a relatively new feature. This has been around for a few months now, but makes it a little bit easier. Annotation character limit. Annotations must be between 4 and 60 characters. Carrier edits. So previously, the admin had the ability in the system to make edits to duty status logs. And what would happen is that after an edit was made to a log, the driver would have to verify the log again. Now, the driver has the option to approve the edit or reject the edit. So it's not just verifying the logs, it's approving the change. And this is largely in place to protect the drivers. There are companies out there, unfortunately, that do make it a habit to edit drivers' logs to help benefit their own business. And this is just a way of preventing that, again, protecting the driver, and another feature that is required by the ELD mandate. Geotab Drive now supports the ability to log in without a vehicle, ability to go into on status to work without occupying a vehicle. So when you sign into the app, on the select vehicle screen, you now have that button at the bottom that says no vehicle. So if maybe you're on the road for most days, but you have one day where you're going to be doing office work and you would be maybe on duty at the office, but you don't need to occupy a vehicle. So maybe something like that is a use case. There is also a personal conveyance threshold. This is listed under the system settings in the database. So if you, as the carrier, have chosen to allow personal conveyance for your drivers, you can set a maximum personal conveyance distance. So what this does, if this is set to 5 miles, I'm the driver, I'm in the vehicle, I hit the personal conveyance exemption. When I hit 5 miles, it's going to put me onto the drive line. It's going to put me back on duty, and it's going to put me on the drive line. So this is a way for the carrier to say, okay, we're going to allow personal conveyance, but only this much. So quick recap here, just before and after. Previously, before Cloud ELD, the tablet was tasked with creating the duty status logs. Now it's a combination of the Go device and the ECM that are mainly tasked with creating those logs. Previously, a drive log was created when the vehicle hit 12 miles an hour. That's not the case anymore. Now it is 5 miles an hour. Before, able to remove automatically generated logs. Now, automatic logs cannot be removed. Before, the driver did not have to approve edits. Now they do have that ability. Before, if a driver was going to work without a vehicle, they may have to use a dummy vehicle in the database. Now they can just select no vehicle. No logs when driver is unassigned. So if the vehicle was driven without someone logged in, it was just a non-event and there were no duty status logs for that. Now we are required to create duty status logs for that, and unassigned driver logs as well. Previously, prompted to verify logs when logging out. Now you are verifying logs when you're logging in and logging out. And then finally, manual vehicle search when signing into the app and selecting a vehicle, and now any vehicles that are within a 1 mile radius will auto-populate. So here are some resources for you. One is the Compliance and Implementation Guide. This document is pretty much everything there is to know about Geotab Drive, about ELD, about hours of service. This pretty much covers everything. I'm just going to take you through this very quickly and point out some of the things in here. So background, understanding hours of service, FMCSA ruling, what's an ELD. Then you're getting into pre-deployment steps in the deployment process, ongoing supervision, and some best practices for that to help keep things running smoothly. Troubleshooting. You have driver guides and admin guides. Reports available in the Geotab Marketplace. Add-ins and useful tools. So this is a long document, and you'll have a link to this here in the deck that I'm about to send you. The last slide here in this deck are some additional resources. So the first three listed here are some additional resources on Cloud ELD. So a recent blog post, how Geotab Cloud ELD works, what is an ELD and Cloud ELD defined, and then finally the Compliance and Implementation Guide, the Drive app manual, which is your user's manual for both Geotab Drive and the admin side, and then finally a couple of shorter sort of quick start guides, Administrator's Guide for Compliance and the Driver's Instruction Guide. All right, that will conclude the formal presentation. Looks like we've had some questions that have been coming through here. So Ben and Carrie, what have you been seeing? What do you got for us?
Okay, the first question coming up is one that is asked all the time, so I think we can kind of broadcast this one. Is there any data at all coming through the IOX cable? The answer to that is no. It is only for power. It has only ever been for power, and currently still remains only for power, even when you are out of coverage. When you come back into coverage, just like Cloud ELD states, when you come back into coverage, then it will sync back up with the database and sync the logs. If you're out of coverage during that time, it does not revert over to the power cable. It is contained right within the tablet or the phone.
Do we have any updates on certification, on the timeline for that?
Yes, it should be. It's going in for certification. It's either this week or next week. We want to make sure we've got a couple of things that are not going to get us stopped. So we're just going through that QA right now. Hopefully by the end of this week, it should go in for certification, and then whatever their turnaround time is, it's a week to 2 weeks, and we'll be up on the website. But for all of you listening, it's there. We're just working on the tweaks. Great.
Are there any updates on the ability to email logs through a DOT inspection if the officer requests that the logs be emailed? Do we know anything on that yet?
Yeah, I believe that is set to be put out in the October release. It's not going to make this one, but it should make the October release. It is it's a known fact, it's wanted, but we still don't have that email who to send to in the first place officially. So it isn't a requirement at this point, which is why I say it'll be October release is what we're aiming for. Until the FMCSA comes out with the actual email address or the web address, there isn't anything that is going to be adjusted.
We had a question come through here. Our vehicles are leased and often leave our yard for maintenance at the vendor shop. Should I create a driver known as mechanic for unassigned driver logs when the mechanic takes my vehicles? That's a good question. So what you cannot do is create a dummy login. So you would not be able to create driver@company.com and just any logs you want to leave unassigned, assign it to them. You can't do that. You could create a specific login for the mechanic, and they could they could log in and then apply the yard move exemption. That would also be an instance where you could just leave the log unassigned and then annotate it as to why you are leaving it unassigned. So that's why that exists. Carrie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just one more thing, and that is that yes, you could add a mechanic and make it an actual login that could be your own, for that matter, as an administrator. And then you could assign the logs to the mechanic. As Ben said, what you can't do is create a fake one, but you can certainly create a mechanic log and assign the log for them, so they don't actually have to log in. Because of course, if it's off-site for a mechanic, or it's somebody you've taken the truck in there, and you get it back 3 days later and they've created 3 other logs on it, you have to be able to assign it or annotate it, as you said. So either way can work, but it does have to officially be set as a login.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Do we have any other questions here to go over?
Nothing that refers to Cloud ELD. I think the biggest thing there is everyone has to recognize Cloud ELD it's completely compliant. We've gone through this already. We have spoken with the FMCSA when the meeting happened in May. It was a question that specifically came up, and they specifically responded to it. If anybody needs the audio on that or the transcript, we can get them that. But it is definitely compliant. And as far as if you are knowing that you are going to be in an area that is spotty coverage, it might be a different solution that we need to talk to you about. But as far as being connected and picking back up again where we lose connection, it's okay. It's completely compliant. We have tested all of those. How long are you out of area coverage for? Does it pick back up? Does it make much of a difference in the logs? And no, it doesn't. So all of those things, I just want to assure you that we've gone through it and we've worked with the FMCSA on it.
Great. Well, there's like I said, there's a number of resources available in the last slide of the deck that I just sent out to you. There's also a number of videos related to ELD that you can find through that compliance and implementation guide, and also available on our YouTube channel. So the last 2 Wildcard Wednesdays that we've done, one has been a complete driver walkthrough of basically day in the life of a driver. The one we did 2 weeks ago was walking through the admin side, from user setup to running reports, editing logs, all of that. So that is available on our YouTube channel. We did have one question just come in here. What if they need to log out from the application? Are they able to do so without cell coverage? I don't believe that they are.
Not currently. We're working on that one as a change on it. Currently, we say if you don't have coverage, we don't want you to log out because we don't want you to lose your logs because we hold them locally, and synchronize as soon as it goes into connection. But knowing that that is a question, we are working on a fix for that, or a change for that, so that the drivers will in the future be able to do that.
And then we also had a question here. If you had to move the truck to the shop, can you move that device to off and then turn it on when you use it? So I assume that's asking about the vehicle hours of service settings where you had on, automatic, off. As I understand it, you could, but I think you might be creating more problems for yourself at that point, having to worry about change settings back and forth on a specific vehicle, or if you forget to change it back to on and the driver goes out the next day and then you don't have duty status logs.
Or if an auditor comes in and says, why is it like this? I think you'd be better off probably just using an annotation to say that it's been out of the shop for all of those logs that may be created.
Yeah.
One other question that comes up with that, one other question that's come up with that is, every time a vehicle moved that is an hours of service vehicle, does it create a log? Yes, it does. By FMCSA regulation, it has to. So turning it off, as you just said, Ben, I wouldn't recommend it. I really wouldn't. Annotate it if it gets done that way, but every single time a vehicle that is used for hours of service is moved, it does create a drive log. So you just simply annotate it to note who it belongs to. And a note on that, when you annotate a log, it no longer shows up for the driver. So he doesn't end up with this whole list of unclaimed logs. If you've annotated them, they are no longer in the driver's site. That's just a side note.
Great. Well, Carrie, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today and helping with these questions. And to all of our attendees, thank you very much for attending as well. We appreciate you joining us. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel and our blog, and we're always adding new content to both of those locations, so be sure to check it out. Once again, my name is Ben Pulowski, so thank you very much for joining us on today's Wildcard Wednesday. Our next Wildcard Wednesday will be 1 week from today, where we will be focusing on some of the new features, the newer features that have just been released to Geotab Drive as of this month. So once again, thank you all very much for attending today. We appreciate it and hope everyone has a great day and a great week. Thanks, everyone.